So today I have a short video that describes one way to prepare to do a lab. It involves obviously reading through the steps of the lab and coming to some understanding of what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. Matter of fact, before any lab ever happens, I'll always ask you, what's the purpose of the lab? And then we'll go from there and talk about the steps, what we're going to do. So I'd like to show you one of the ways that I think through it, and it helps me know where I'm going and keeps me on track. So let me show you what I do with this. So the purpose of the lab is to demonstrate the conservation of mass after a reaction. And so the first thing that Wiley has us to do is to prepare an indicator solution. And to prepare that indicator solution is he just says take a pot, draw a pot there, put some water in it, add some cabbage leaves to that pot. So we're going to add 2 or 3 cabbage leaves to that pot. And then what we're going to do is put that pot on a hot plate. I'm going to say heat to boil about 5 minutes. Allow to cool. And then we're going to end up with, there's our pot again. It's got our cabbage leaves in there. It's got our, and it's going to change color. Let's say that it starts off blue. In all probability, it might be a little bit blue in that water. It depends on our cabbage and our water. So now I have created our indicator solution. From there, he says to determine the mass of a beaker. So I'm going to draw a beaker here. Beaker has some gradations on it. And before we add anything to it, he wants us to know what the mass of that beaker is. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it on a scale. I'll just write scale, and I'll say that, and I'll record the mass. So many grams for the beaker. And so now I have my beaker, and to that beaker, he says to add about 60 milliliters of vinegar. So I'm going to write 60 mils, I'll say about, vinegar. And I'm just going to draw it and place it in my beaker. And there we have our, oh, there we go, there's my camera back. And there we have our vinegar in the beaker. And vinegar in the beaker is going to start off as clear in all probability. And to that, we are going to add 10 milliliters of our cool indicator solution. So I'm going to take some of that indicator solution, about 10 mils, and add it to my beaker. And that is probably going to produce a color. It probably will not remain blue. Whenever I put that indicator into that, it's going to, it's probably going to go to a pink color. But I want you to do this. Note the color of the beaker. So I'll just say note color of the vinegar solution with the indicator in it. Next thing we're going to do is finish completing our system. So he encourages you to take a stir rod and lay it in the side of that so you can measure the mass of the stir rod with the system, but we're going to actually use a stir bar and put it on a stir plate. So I'm going to draw a stir bar in there, and I'll just write that, stir bar, and that's going to be my reaction vessel. The next thing he wants us to do is to prepare one of our other reagents. So he says take about a teaspoon of lye, TSP lye, and put it on a watch glass. So I'm going to just draw a flat little watch glass there, put it on that, and now I've got my lye. It's going to be a powder. Lye is caustic, so when we're working with the lye, we'll have our safety glasses on, we'll have our gloves on, our lab coat on. And now I have all of my reactants. I've got my lye, I've got my vinegar, I've got my indicator for my reaction. So I'm going to keep my lye and my vinegar separate at this point, but I want to determine the mass of all my reactants before the reaction takes place. So I'm going to take that watch glass and I'm going to set it right on top of my beaker there, and I'm going to put them both, I'm going to put those two things together, put them both on a scale, and record the mass of the watch glass, the lye, the beaker, the vinegar, the stir bar, and the 10 mils of my indicator. And so I'm going to say that that is going to have so many grams. And the important thing about that measurement is that is the mass of the entire system before we do our reaction. And what we're wanting to test is, do we change mass? Do we gain mass? Do we lose mass whenever we have a reaction? And after that, I'm going to, I have that mass. Now I'm going to take the lye that's in this wash glass, and I'm just going to dump it into my beaker, and we're going to create the reaction. So I'm going to redraw my beaker down here. It's got my vinegar in it. It's got my stir bar in it. It's got my indicator in it. At this point, that is probably pink. And to that, I'm just going to dump my lye into that reaction, or into that vessel. I'm going to place it on a stir plate. And dissolve as best we can the lye. It's not important that it all gets dissolved, but we'll run the stir bar, dissolve the lye. And then we're going to make some observations. So one of the observations is a question: is there a change in temperature from when we weighed the beaker ahead of time? Now, if we touch that beaker along the side, is it warmer? Is it colder? How about a change in color? It was pink when I added the lye to it. Did it stay pink? Did it go blue? Did it go yellow? What color does it become? And then the last one, which is really the more important of all of our measurements, is the mass. Is there a change in mass? And to answer that question, I'm going to take our beaker with the stir bar still in it. I'm going to place the watch glass right back on top of it and get to the point where I'm going to reweigh it. And I'm going to see what the mass of that whole system is after the reaction. And I'm going to record that mass in grams. And then I'm going to compare that mass right there with that mass right there, whatever that was, and see if there was a change in mass. The law of conservation of mass says that even though there's a reaction, if we keep all of the reagents, if we have all of the products from the reactant, it's all still contained in our system, that we shouldn't have gained any mass or lost any mass. So that's our lab. That's kind of just a walkthrough of how to do it. And this is the way that I would like for you to talk to me about and tell me how the lab is going to go. So I'm always going to ask you at the beginning of the lab, what's the purpose of it? And then what are we going to do? What are we looking for? What are we expecting? If you can diagram it out, if you can just talk it through me, if you want to write it out in some paragraph form, I'm looking for an indication that you understand what we're doing and not just that you are repeating what the notes in the book say. So that's a quick little video on how to prepare for a lab.